There's no doubt that SUV crossovers are the most popular vehicle segment nowadays, but most of them, especially from the cheaper brands, they are just simply an economical car that's been jacked up and often features a very simple front-wheel drive driving setup. But not for Mazda, because in the midst of the electrification, Mazda has decided to create literally a new internal combustion engine platform for its big SUVs known as large product group. They have featured a longitudinal engine setup with a rear-wheel drive configuration, so it's quite the opposite of what you've seen in most economical SUVs nowadays. And one of those models is this. This is the Mazda CX-80, often dubbed as the flagship model for markets like Japan, Europe, and Asia. So in today's video, we're going to have a dive deep into Mazda's new flagship SUV and see why the European brand should be worried about this Japanese number. Konnichiwa, Mukuru Sazumasu Tomo Ishimasu. Yokoso, Caricarz. Right, so the CX-80 is essentially a stretched-out version of the Mazda CX-60, which has been concurrently launched with this car. So this is essentially a three-row version of the CX-60, but in terms of design and everything, you can see it retains the same Kodo design language we've seen on previous Mazda SUV, but with a bit of a different iteration. And at the front here, you can see it looks quite similar to the CX-60. Okay, up front here, you get this new LED headlight design where this part is actually reserved for the turn signal, and you'll be greeted with this new massive front grille with Mazda badge. And if you notice, there's this three silver chrome accent here. This is to indicate a tiger claw scratch, so it gives us a bit of a design dimension on this otherwise plain black or grey. But other than that, the front face looks very commanding and it looks very similar to the Mazda CX-60 because technically they're twins. Right, the Kodo design language ethos is quite apparent on the exterior design of the CX-80, where you can see it comes with this elongated front hood and a sporty rear end, just like many other Mazda SUVs before. But front here, you can see it comes with this front fender accent where it says PHEV because yes, this is a plug-in hybrid SUV. You get your typical sloping roofline with this chrome surround because technically this is a premium car, so you need a bit of a chrome to make it look a bit more posher. Black top side mirror caps, you got typical physical door handles. You get this 20-inch all black alloys, and at the back you can see the back design is a bit just supposed like that because they need to make an extra space just for the rear passenger as well as for the cargo. But overall dimension, this car is quite big, over 4.95 meters long, making it on par with other popular SUVs like the Volvo XC90, Audi Q7, Mercedes-Benz GLE, and many more. And at the rear part of the CX-80, things look quite simplistic because like I mentioned just now, it comes with this a bit of a curve on the rear and design, and it comes with like simple roof mounted spoiler. But I really like the new taillights here because it comes with this elongated LED DRL that almost meet in the middle, but it gives the car a bit of the wider stand because it's quite a narrow car and it's a bit longer compared to the CX-60. But overall, you can see the lower bumper garnish is quite simple. There are no exposed tailpipes or whatsoever. So overall, this car, you can see in terms of design, is a bit being designed towards a more mature audience. So it does look a bit more handsome, but maybe not as sporty as other. Right, folks, so now we're inside the CX-80 and this is where you get to feel the premiumness of these Japanese flagship SUV because as you can see from the get-go, it comes with this two-tone tan and black colorway, thus giving this car an already premium vibe. But even the material usage is actually quite premium because it comes with this Napa leather and some sweet Alcantara insert here, but it comes, like I said, in black and this tan color, which looks quite nice. Okay, we'll start with the seats because not only both of these seats are powered, they're also heated and ventilated, and you've got memory function for the driver's side. Okay, same goes with the steering wheel because it's a simple multi-function steering wheel, but it's also power control and it's actually come with heated function. And the design, it looks something similar to like you found in a Bentley or some sort and does feel very premium indeed. Okay, in terms of screen setup, unlike those Chinese or most EVs nowadays, the Mazda CX-80 retains a very driver-centric setup where as a result, you can see the screen center is not that big. It's about 12.3 inch. It supports wireless Apple CarPlay, but unfortunately, Android users, you still need to use a cable. But other than that, you also get a full-color digital cluster, a head-up display that looks quite nice. It could have been brighter, but it's still usable. But like I said, Mazda still retains the the Jinbai Itai concept, the car and driver unison as one. As you can see, the screen is not too big because it prevents driver from getting too distracted, and you still got lots of physical controls and dials and buttons. For example, the climate controls and for the seat climate adjustment are all located here. And as also you get this dial to control the infotainment. You can use this as a touchscreen, and you also get button to change the drive modes and everything. Okay, while we're here, we're also going to talk about the center console. It comes with this fake wood within that looks alright, doesn't look as posh as something you see on Volvo and whatsoever, but it still gets this job done. You also got wireless charging pad, USB charging ports, Type C by the way, and many other amenities. Okay, highlighting the cabin amenities at the front, you get very minimal ambient lights. It's more like a very simple light, not really those fancy ones you see in Mercedes. Full panoramic sunroof, and it comes with this 12-speaker Bose sound system, which sounds quite good. Maybe not as good as something inside of Volvo with the Bang & Olufsen, but still good enough for you and me. Alright, at the back you can see that the CX-80 for our market comes with a 6-seater configuration featuring a 2-2-2 seating layout. So as a result, at the second row you get these two very fancy, very comfortable captain style seats. They are powered and also ventilated and heated, which is quite nice to see and quite deserving because technically, again, like I said, this is supposed to be Mazda's flagship SUV. Okay, the thing about having two captain chairs is that it's quite hard to access at the rear seat because you can see the center console here is quite tall because you got the central tunnel hump and everything. And down here you get this very thick center console. You got some storage space, cup holders. But the good thing is, like other premium SUVs out there, you get dedicated control panel, not just for climate, but also for seat adjustment down here. And you also get two USB charging ports and two aircon vents here. Okay, in terms of space, I would say if you're just bringing your boss, I would say you can just slide the seats all the way back. But if you want to sit some people in the third row, you might need to go just a bit to the front just to make space for the third row because despite its wheelbase is more than 3 meters long and longer than some other European three-row SUVs out there, space at the back is a bit tight because you have to remember this is a plug-in hybrid, so they need to make some room to store the battery and the fuel tank. So as a result, the floor at the third row space is quite tall, so not really ideal for adults, but I think kids should have a bit of a problem because at the back here, it's quite alright because you get almost full-size seat, you got USB charging ports and whatnot. So it's quite livable, but don't expect it to be as spacious as something like an MPV at the end of the day. Okay, boot space also is quite decent because as standard, you got about 258 liters of space, expandable to over 600 liters once you fold down the third row seats. But of course, this being a plug-in hybrid, there's no space for a spare wheel. But other than that, life at the second row of the Mazda CX-80 is the best, definitely one of the best, if not the best in the segment. But third row is a bit of compromise, but at least you got the privacy line. Right, so as I mentioned earlier, the CX-80 here underpins Mazda's new large product group platform where it is built with a rear-wheel drive bias and a longitudinal engine layout. Well, as you know, the flagship model for the CX-80 uses Mazda's new 3.3-liter inline-six engine, but in the CX-80 PHEV here, it uses a smaller 2.5-liter four-cylinder naturally aspirated Skyactiv G petrol engine. As a result, you can see the engine bay, there's a bit of the space of a gap because the engine is not really as big as the inline-six. But interestingly, this also means that Mazda can place the engine slightly behind the front axle, thus improving the weight distribution on this SUV. The engine itself is rated about 189 horsepower and 261 Nm of torque, but it's also been mated to an electric motor where this is getting interesting because the electric motor is located between the engine and the new 8-speed automatic transmission, where the new gearbox doesn't even come with a conventional torque converter, where the electric motor itself acts as intermediary to send the engine power to all-wheels because yes, this is an all-wheel drive car with Mazda's proprietary iActive AWD system. Okay, interestingly, as a result, the whole setup outputs about 323 horsepower and 500 Nm of torque, which is quite meaty and enough for this size of an SUV. But interestingly, this is quite a heavy car because you got batteries, you got all-wheel drive system, engine. It weighs about 2.3 tons, but Mazda has actually elected to not give it any active or air suspension system, where it instead got a simple double wishbone front, multi-link rear setup, which is quite familiar you see in a sportier SUV, maybe like the BMW X5. But again, like I said, no air sus, no active suspension. Well, since this is a plug-in hybrid, the CX-80 does come with the battery pack that's capacity about 17.8 kWh lithium ion, which is, to be honest, compared to other modern PHEVs, is really not that big, especially for this size of a car. But in terms of charging, we know it supports only AC 7.2 kilowatt, allowing this car to charge from 0 to 100 in about 2.5 hours, which is not bad because, like I said, the battery is not really that big to begin with. But With smaller batteries, you also get a bit of compromise in terms of range because Mazda claims the EV-only range for this PHEV is about 65 kilometers, and that is according to a more lenient NEDC standards. But if you translate it to WLTP, maybe you're looking about 40 kilometers, which is, I think, is enough for your daily commute, whatnot. But just like any other PHEVs out there, if you're lazy to charge it plug-in, you can also use the engine to charge it like a series parallel hybrid system. Combined with its 70-liter fuel tank, Mazda claims of a combined fuel efficiency rate of about 1.6 liter per 100 km. So if you do a bit of the math, you can get about 800 plus or up to 1000 km of range from this, provided that you drive it conservatively. Enough talk, let's drive. All right, folks, now we're behind the wheel of the Mazda CX-80 2.5G PHEV AWD High Plus CBU. Okay, upon immediately can really feel the premiumness of this car because yes, it's a big car and it does glide on the road in a rather smooth manner. But of course, being a Mazda, we talk about the most important thing first, which is handling, because we're happy to report, yes, this big SUV with its plug-in hybrid engine and everything still drives like a proper Mazda. So for this size of an SUV, it certainly feels quite engaging, so much so it certainly feels like you're just driving a CX-5 because you don't really feel like you're driving a big car in a good way, because it feels quite engaging because the steering feel is quite good. It's not too numb. Yes, it's a bit softer, the steering feel, compared to CX-30 or maybe CX-5, but it's still well connected enough, not unlike many other Chinese SUVs out there. So you can really see that Mazda has put a lot of effort into the steering feel and in terms of handling also, because this is a big of a car that Mazda actually introduces the new KPC, which is Kinematic Posture Control, which is essentially like the extended version of their top vector control, where on hard, like fast corners, the inner wheel actually provide just a bit of gentle braking just to provide some better stability and to prevent some over body roll of a car. But of course, this being a tall and big SUV, you still feel a bit of a B-roll, especially on fast corner, but it does feel a bit more sure-footed than any other big SUVs out there. And again, like I said, this is quite impressive considering that this car does not even have an air suspension system like many other premium European SUVs out there. So yes, it comes with a double wishbone front multi-link rear. It's certainly a very sports car bias layout, but I would say the CX-80, they have dialed down the tuning a bit to be a bit more softer, a bit more on the comfort bias compared to the CX-60, because CX-60 I think definitely feels a bit more engaging compared to this, but still quite sporty enough. It really feels like you're driving something like a BMW rather than a big SUV like Volvo or even Mercedes-Benz, which is a good thing. Okay, in terms of power, like I said, 353 horsepower for 500 newtons of torque is definitely more than enough to get this car going because, like I said, this is a heavy car, 2.3 ton. But the problem actually lies once you drive it slow because it's quite susceptible to a bit of torque jerking, especially like if you're driving in a residential area like this. Because, like I said, this car, the gearbox does not come with a torque converter because Mazda elected to remove them for the sake of making the car more engaging, just like the Miata or something. So as a result, it's a bit on a compromise on the comfort because you get a bit of a jerking, but not too often. But that's something that you really have to take note a bit. But other than that, it's quite superb in terms of drivability. But more importantly, in terms of comfort, surprisingly, it's quite okay. Maybe not as plush as something like Alfa Fire or even those European SUVs, air suspension, but second and third row passengers can feel a bit okay and it's good enough. That's what I mean. But other than that, the NVH level here is sublime because, like I said, it's a plug-in hybrid. So most of the time at lower speed, it runs on electric motor, so you don't get any engine noise. But even on high highway speed, the only notable noise are the tire because it uses this Goodyear FUG tires. Not the best in the market. Maybe if you put something like a Michelin or Pirelli, it might have been a bit better. But other than that, yes, this car might be tuned a bit subtle, more towards like comfort or like to premium or family, but it is still a Mazda. It still drives like a Mazda. So yeah, it's a mix of both. It's a sporty SUV, but at the same time, it's a good car for you to carry your boss or even your families. Okay, in terms of efficiency, because like I said earlier, the CX-80 here, it only comes in a plug-in hybrid form, but I have to say, compared to maybe like other more modern advanced Chinese PHEVs, maybe the CX-80 is a bit lacking in terms of efficiency and range because you see all these super hybrid system in China like with over 1000, even 1500 km compressive range, but not the same case for the CX-80 because I think the PHEV system here it's just more tuned towards to provide an extra boost of power for this car because it's quite a bit of a car, so you need that extra juice. And in terms of battery capacity also, like I said, it's quite small. So as a result, the EV range you get about 65 km and EDC, which is it's good enough for daily use. But once I use it quite early because I only driven it like when I started fully charging, I drove about 30-40 km and it almost dripped it to zero. So goes to show that maybe it's not the most efficient batteries out there, but at least it also helps the car to give a bit of power, and more importantly, for longer travel range, you can just extend the lifespan of your fuel tank just a bit further. But like I said, don't expect it to be on par with those super hybrids from China, but it still gets the job done. Okay, when it comes to safety, this is where I really like about Mazda because I mean, most Japanese brands or continental brands in general, because they really get their ADAS system tuned to Malaysian road conditions pretty good because it's not too jittery, not too finicky and shocking like most Chinese ADAS system. But at the same time, it's also quite easy to use. I mean, maybe they don't have like some other fancy stuff, but you still got things like adaptive cruise control, blind spot detection, rear cross traffic alert, and 360 camera view, which I think is more than enough for this size of a car. It's quite easy to use. You got dedicated buttons on the right side of the steering wheel. You even got the display mode for the ADAS functions of it, so it really is easy to use and it's quite good to use. So I really recommend it for you to try the ADAS function in Mazda. I think compared to other Japanese brands, this is one of the more usable ones compared to other brands out there. But overall, like I said, efficiency, it's okay. You don't expect it to be like very frugal like those super hybrid system, and safety, it's quite good because at the end of the day, this is a Mazda. All right, all in all, after spend a relatively short but meaningful time with the CX-80 here, I still think that this flagship PHEV SUV makes a very good compelling argument against the popular Germans and European adversaries out there. And more importantly, wait until you hear the price because this Mazda is just tagged at 295,000 ringgit. That might sound a bit too expensive for a Japanese car, but you have to remember the next gen Mazda model, particularly from the large product group, they intended to go against the big European giants out there. So 300 grand for this size of a car is quite cheap, and it also makes this car more than 100,000 ringgit cheaper than those European adversaries I mentioned earlier. Okay, some might complain that this car might be a bit too sporty for those who are looking for a boss ride because, of course, we know Mazda, they like to retain the G-by-Itai concept. The one driver, one feel is a very driver-centric SUV despite its size. But I would say it will still make a pretty decent boss ride, provided that you need to just set your suspension just a bit low because, like I said, they don't have air suspension whatsoever. But all in all, I have to say, yes, the European giants have a lot to worry about this new Japanese SUV, and the new CX-80 also has set a new standard for Japanese cars here in Malaysia. Caricarz.